Oh, I lied to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we're on episode 279, and we thought we'd chat a little bit about. Well, I labeled the episode New Rides and Some Insight, and let me explain a little bit more, and maybe you guys can think of a better title for this. But anyway, Ben recently purchased a few motorcycles for himself and his kids there to get out on the trails, and there's a lot of research that went into it because and I say we because he was bouncing ideas off me, but mainly Ben in this, 100%, was looking for a budget friendly option because he could spend a ton of money on one bike or a reasonable amount of money and get two bikes, two new bikes in this case. And I mean, we bounced quite a bit of ideas off each other there. One night we looked at them and the sizes and stuff like that, and you finally settled on a brand and went for it. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the research you did, and I helped you with a little bit there. The decision you ended up on and how you feel about that bike so far. And as we said before we came on, maybe your initial thoughts, what you like, what you don't like, what you would change. And if there is interest, because I do think there's going to be some interest in this, perhaps we can reapproach this episode in about a year later and then get your feelings on it then, just to help folks out.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Um, yeah, let's get a little bit of background. My daughter and I were talking about things. There's trail systems close to where I go down in the States, and I have a spot to store some bikes. And I thought it would be a great activity for me and my daughter to go do those trails together. So first, I just wanted to get her something, but I can't give her something and then not myself join her. So we need it too. So my first instinct was let's buy a couple of used dirt bikes. So I go online, I'm looking, and honestly, there wasn't much there for less than $2,000 or $3,000 a bike. Um, that was anything like a brand name like we would know. So like a Suzuki, a Honda, a Yamaha, a Kawasaki, something like that. That was small. I was looking for like a 125 for her and about a 250, 300 for myself. Nothing super big or heavy, something light and nimble on the trail. Because these aren't super long trails. I'm not doing hour-long treks. I'm probably doing 15, 20-minute rides. So that was what I was looking for. And I couldn't get over the price. And what I was also looking at is these are 10, 15, 20-year bikes. They're not brand new. There's maintenance. There's just parts that have worn out or just dried up and cracked. I'm probably gonna have to replace fuel lines, gaskets, uh, God knows what. Plus, older bikes can be, and you know this yourself, more difficult to get parts for.
Absolutely. And just a couple comments on that is I am actually staggered by how much, I guess, how motorcycles are holding their value, but I don't think they're holding their value. I think they're being overvalued. You know what I mean? The prices people are asking, maybe that is reasonable for right now, but it still seems like it's gouging. People are asking almost new prices for these smaller bikes, like the 150s and 250s specifically, even at 10, 15 years old. They're only asking a couple $100 off retail. And you're like,
A
well,
couple of them were more expensive. When I looked up the NSRP on some Hondas and Yamahas, they were actually more expensive to buy the used ones. Like it didn't make sense to not buy it. But here was the thing. I don't have an unlimited budget. I don't, and nobody does, but some people have more budget than the others. And if this is what you spend your money on and you can afford to buy two brand new Yamahas, absolutely, fill your boots. Same thing with Honda. But a 250 or a 300 Honda, you're looking at 8 grand probably.
yeah, we
I,
priced some of them out there, and we were anywhere between 5 and 10 grand looking at a few different bikes between Hondas and Suzuki's at least.
yeah. So um, the two bikes I purchased with shipping, with taxes, everything all told, I think came out to receipts there somewhere. Uh, and this was American, less than $3,400.
Yeah,
So that was shipped to my house, unassembled, so I had to do some work. Now, the work I had to do, for anyone who's wondering, I had to hook up the rear suspension, I had to put the front tire on, had to um, put some of the fairings on. Nothing overly complicated. The worst part was on the 250 because it's fully lighted, so it has turn signals, headlights, all that. A little dash display. the wiring where it comes around the tree, the triple tree.
Yep, triple tree.
It's a little bit of a finicky thing, and I'm not sure I did it the best method. And I see a lot of people have had this issue. It's you can't have it, so it's getting crushed every time. But honestly, I've recently had problems with my Suzuki V-Strom in the same area, where that's where a lot of the connections are. And the last person who probably did some work on it managed to move the main bundle. There's usually a boot sitting over the top of it. They moved the main bundle in such a way that it is now bumping on something, and I had to readjust some lines so that I could turn without pulling a wire loose or having issues.
And I mean, like
So
you
this
said, that
is,
is an inherent problem with a lot of dirt bikes.
yeah,
And adventure touring bikes, they always tend to run the wiring harness up and around the triple tree, like you said, because the gauge cluster and stuff sits a little closer to the handlebars and the top of the triple and stuff like that. Like on street bikes and stuff, generally you have all that fairing to hide the wires. You can get things a little further away. You get a bird cage in there. You get lots of room to work. Not so much
yeah,
with a dirt bike. So for people that are wondering about that, that is something that's going to be inherent for most adventure style dirt bikes, things without big puffy front fairings, basically.
yeah, yeah. So that was the hardest part of it. Honestly, like I also looked at what's replacement parts. And me and you were talking briefly, and I gave you an estimate of the cost, and apparently I lied to you. It was
I
not
seen
nearly as
that.
expensive, not nearly as expensive as I thought it was. I thought it was going to be like 16 bucks. I was wrong. It was 12. So I can get replacement parts. So one thing, the tail light on mine did not properly work. I've seen other reviews where this wasn't a unique problem to me. Contacted the manufacturer. Honestly, within 24 hours, they got back to me and told me there was one shipped to me. I have no complaints. I probably owe someone something because it's probably going to get uh, shipped to an acquaintance or a friend's house, depending on how you want to look at it. And hopefully, they don't get frustrated with me because it got shipped to their address again. But that's fine. Yeah. So I'm getting a new tail light shipped to me to replace the existing one. Easy fix. Not going to take me more than 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Had to do an oil change. That was it.
Yeah, but this is all still stuff, that's par for course. I guess one of the avenues I would like to jump down right at this moment, or close to this moment, I guess, is what are some of the things to look for when you are looking for this bike? Because it's not going to be as easy as comparing it to, say, a Honda and Yamaha and stuff like that, because where these are brand names that we know a lot more often, when you compare a 250 from the big brand names, they're a lot more similar in specs than it's going to be when you start running off with some of the off-brand names. And not that the off-brand names are bad, it's just that they're not directly competing in that same majority demograph, so they don't have to be as close on in specs. So what I'm thinking of is if you get a 250 with a Cowie, Yamaha, and stuff like that, you're probably looking at around 30 horsepower, 30 to 40 horsepower, depending on all the modifications and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Now, with the off-brand ones, you may not be getting anywhere near 30 horsepower, but you may have to look at your power curve and torque and stuff like that, which could be geared different to give you different results on that bike. So that bike may be a little bit lower sped. You're not going to have such a top end on it, but you're still going to have lots of pull and things. And I know this was something you looked at. Aside from CC size, you looked at a couple of the other direct specs. So what was important to you while you were looking this up, then?
Um, so important to me was mainly I didn't care if I had the most powerful, best vehicle out there. I didn't need that. What I needed was something that I could go with my daughter. Honestly, I'm not trying to do 60-mile-per-hour down dirt trails. This bike was not meant to be highway, although apparently I can get it licensed to go on the highway. There's a few forms I need to fill out. I have the forms for Washington State where I would do it, and it's I think $100 for the inspection, and I think the inspection office said I could have saved myself a bit of money had I done it right away, but it might cost me another 150 at the office. So for about 250, I can get the thing spec'd as a road bike or an off-road vehicle that's insured for the road, and I can drive it down public roadways and stuff, which is a great advantage for some things. All that being said, what are you looking for? I mean, look for something that fits you, that meets your needs. These bikes, the best way I can describe it, and other people have described it, it's as if you took a bike from, say, the 80s and the 90s and manufactured it today. And I've heard that the engine is a direct clone of a Honda engine. The body parts look to be clones off of like KTM, Suzuki's. It's a collection of generic parts. But the interesting thing is, it will it'll fit a hell of a lot of more brand name things. So a lot of people are swapping the carbs out for Nibby carbs. People are swapping handlebars out for pro tapers. They're swapping these things out, and you can make it what you want. Also, expect you're going to have to do some work on it. You're going to have to tighten up nuts and bolts. You're going to have to do maybe a little bit, but it's going to teach you about it. So for me, I was buying something for my daughter. I wanted her to learn how to operate it, how to maintain it, and how to fix it. So it's going to give her those opportunities.
Absolutely. And that was one of the comments I said to you, not only while you were looking it up, but just recently, was one of the things with off-name bikes is a little bit of mechanical knowledge is going to go a long way. Now, do you have to be an absolute motorcycle mechanic? No, you don't have to be, but being a little bit mechanically inclined. Know how to do some of your oil changes, know how to put some nuts and bolts together, know some basic functionality of around the mechanical aspects of the bike is going to go a huge way. Once again, as I was telling you, what I find with a lot of these off-brand ones, and I'm just going to use GV as an example because that's one that I have direct, experience with. A lot of their little bikes, people will shun them and be like, oh, they're terrible bikes, blah, 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 blah. They're really not. They are a very cost-effective bike that requires a ton of maintenance. You know what I mean? Because this is where they save money. Yes, the parts are a little lower quality, so you have to keep your oil changed a lot more. You have to be a lot more conscious of heat distribution and buildup. You have to be a lot more conscious of when to replace your rings and stuff, which I'm sure you are finding out with two-stroke engines there. They recommend after so many hours you got to replace the rings and sleeves regardless of the brand name. Now there's lots of people out there that don't do it, but if you look in the recommended maintenance, they do recommend these things.
But
It's
these are four-stroke.
yeah. Oh, yours are both four-stroke? I thought the 125 was two-stroke.
Oh, four
Oh,
strokes.
my bad then. In the case of a two-stroke engine, and I'm thinking like the CR250s from the Hondas versus the GVs, they do recommend after so many hundreds of hours or whatever it is, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, that you're supposed to replace the rings and sleeves and stuff in the bikes. Doesn't matter. It's way more important in the GVs, for instance, than it is in the Hondas. The Hondas, you have a little bit more tolerance. You have to do it right by the hour they give you. If you go over a little bit, chances are things are going to be okay. You might lose a little performance. There might be a little extra buildup and stuff in them, but you can probably run it a little bit. The GV, you're probably only going to get up to the hours they list, and you may want to do it a little earlier then. But as long as you do it, it's relatively easy, and it'll keep the thing running great. Point being, maintenance becomes a lot more key generally on the off-brand things. And you should stick to the maintenance schedule that they have listed there because, once again, the tolerances, my experience, just aren't there. Not that that's a bad thing, just be aware of what you're getting.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I think this is important to know, there is communities out there for anyone who's interested. So by that I mean, if you're interested in these type of bikes, there is a active, live, real community that will quite gladly accept you, and they seem to share. And there's also like upgrade kits you can get, and honestly, a lot of the stuff is fractional cost. So, do I expect it's going to be a little bit more? I mean, it has a carburetor. You're not buying many bikes today that are carbureted.
No, a lot of them have upgraded fuel injection, and arguably for the better or worse. I like a carbureted bike. Generally, you may not get it running perfect, but you can generally get it running to get you home. As where if you have problems with fuel injection, you're dead in the water until you get the electronics looked at. Personal preference and experience level, once again, folks, not the be-all to end-all with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, those of us who know and love carburetors, know and love the struggle of it. Altitude can make a bigger difference. Hot and cold makes a bigger difference. It's rarely as quick as a quick start. But once you get it dialed in, it runs quite well for quite a while without any issues, until something significant in the environment changes, and then you may have to and some carbs are more forgiving than others. Uh, the the old Hondas
I was just
really
about to
never
say
had.
nothing beats an old Honda carburetor. I bet you there's still some out in the 80s now buried in barns. If you were to go and throw some brake cleaner down its throat, they'd kick off. 100%.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Um, and I mean, a lot of that stuff's been cloned, so that technology. This is where you're saving a lot of the money. These companies, I mean, some people say, oh, they're China bikes. These companies didn't have to spend a fortune on R&D. That was done. It was done 20 years ago. It was done 40 years ago. Uh, and so it was easy to buy those patents and technologies or get licensed for those technologies because Honda doesn't want to make them anymore. Yamaha doesn't want to make them anymore. So, they can make a few bucks on an old technology. Why not?
No,
And
absolutely. And that's the thing. Know what you are getting. As you stated at the first, you wanted a couple bikes that you could go banging down the trails. This is not going to be your everyday daily driver that you're banging back and forth to work, putting great amounts of kilometers on it, highway riding, stuff like that. You got a bike for that. This is something to get out there on the trail and have fun with. So,
yeah,
realistically, what are you going to put on it? A couple hours a week?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Realistically, which is probably highballing it, to be honest with you. But I mean, ideally for
Average
the first
week,
while.
average week, probably that. I mean, might I get a trailer or something and tow it to somewhere else and maybe do a small trip? Possibly. Uh, I can think of a few places that this thing would vastly beat my my V-Strom. Uh, on the single track runs. Yeah, I think this much lighter, much smaller, more nimble. I mean, it sits quite high. Bike, with significantly longer suspension travel, would be a better ride.
Yeah, and I can see that. And that's the thing. You don't always want the biggest and better bike, quote unquote, there, not bigger and better. The bigger bike is not always what you want, especially when you're going around trails and stuff like that, as you said. Just the exertion to throw around a heavier bike. The V-Strom. Could you imagine firing that around trails all day for a short time? A lot of fun. Doing it all
Uh,
day, heavy fatigue.
it's it can be nerve-wracking going down some of the bigger hills with a heavy bike that's pretty rocky and everything's slipping and sliding and you're trying to control this heavy bike up and down these rough trails and roads. It is harder. And I had a buddy, he's there on there with a CRF 300, and he's dancing up and down them like it's a joke to him. But that bike is so much more like a bicycle in a lot of ways than a motorcycle when you're off road on it. Like it's light enough that he can flick it around and stuff. And he threw everything
But that's
in a
the
milk
thing. It's
carton.
also a bike that was designed to do that with its sole purpose in mind, versus
Yeah,
yours, which is kind of like an adventure touring. Yeah, you can do a
yeah.
little dirt, but you're going on adventures. You're going to be riding on roads, dirt roads, street roads. They had to balance everything out there. So just the gyroscopics of the bike, the weight distribution on the bike and stuff is going to make things a little bit more unbalanced for you in that kind of looser terrain, as where, the dirt bikes are meant to do that kind of stuff. They're a dirt bike.
Yeah. I also can't carry the gear I can on the other bike. Like I am not throwing, the entire garage that I need. So on the V-Strom, I have everything to change tires. I have room to take spare tubes. I have room to take a full toolkit, and I can throw right across the pantiers a 100-liter duffel bag full of every bit of gear I need for camping. Something like that, I definitely have to go lightweight. Hammock, sleeping bag, and basic meals. Like that's it. Nothing else. But it's a good trip too.
Small dirt bikes is what I'd like to have. So Steve joined us, the Drifting Spore. Small dirt bike is what I'd like to have, 200 cc's or less. And honestly, Steve, this is kind of what this episode is about. So just to recap, because we are coming up on 20 minutes and try to stay with our new timing schedule, at least somewhat.
Mm.
Don't shun away from the off-brand bikes. Just be aware of what you're getting. Yeah, the tolerances may not be as great. You should have a little bit more mechanical know-how, but don't let that deter you as well. As Ben has said, there's online communities that are going to teach you a lot. So at the very minimum, you should just have a willingness to learn a little bit of the maintenance know-how for the bike. There's communities out there that are going to explain a lot more to you. about what to do when you run into, maybe some of that quirky things that's specific to your bike, how to do some of the upgrades and things like that. The other thing we covered a little bit is don't necessarily go with the CC size as the be all to end all for the bike you're looking at. Because as we said, if you're comparing it to the larger manufacturers' bikes, yes, they're a little bit more closer in tune with each other and stay in spec with each other, as were the off brand. They have a little bit more freedom, so to speak, where they're not competing on that major level. Yes, your power may go up and down a little bit, and your torque and stuff may go up and down a little bit, so you're going to have to get familiar with those numbers and find out what is going to work with you. And be honest with yourself. Get a bike for what you want it to do. If you don't want to do 60 mile an hour down the road, you don't necessarily need something that's geared that high or that has that much horsepower. So keep it within
This,
reality.
this, the paperwork for this one says it's 19 horsepower,
There you go. So for
right?
that's the 250.
That's the 250. I have everything here actually. I have.
So at 19 horsepower and a 250, what that's telling me, and I could be wrong on this, but just from my experience with the motorcycle, is that engine's tolerances are probably not as high as what the other ones are. No surprise there. So the RPMs are probably going to be down a little bit, which means you're going to lose a bit of that top end. You're not getting that high RPM power output. Generally, you're probably going to lose a little speed and maybe a little bottom end grunt. All of these things can be changed briefly with a little motorcycle know-how. If you need a little bit more bottom end pull, you can do a sprocket swap or a sprocket exchange. You can either, put a couple teeth in the back, drop one in the front. You can fine tune some of that stuff in. Top end speed in this instance, as Ben said for him, wasn't that big of a, concern, so don't have to worry too much on that. The torque band, when we looked it up, it was still relatively good for the size of the bike. Also, a lot of these smaller bikes, they tend to be a little, well, you're going to go one of two sides. They either tend to be a lot lighter or a lot heavier, depending on how cheap you actually go. If they're really, really cheap, generally getting into a lot of steel, you're going to have to watch that power to weight ratio. But in the realm where Ben was, it was just, a good bang for buck bike. The weight is still good for the power to weight ratio, so Ben shouldn't have any problems on that. Did you dig your paperwork out there, Ben?
Yeah, I'm missing one thing. I think I don't know if the small one, the 125 says 6.8 horsepower.
Yeah. But once again, for what you folks are doing, that's not a big deal. You know what I mean?
No,
It's
no,
not like
it,
what's another one 125. So a CBR 125R, which is a crotch rod style motorcycle. They get probably, I assume they're going to get more than that, but either way, different kind of horsepower for a different type of riding. You know what I mean? They wanted a little bit of high end on that. I think they go out at around like 14 horsepower or something like that. But anyway, the idea was they wanted a little bit more. It also winds out a little bit more because people are going to try and bop these up and down the streets a little bit. As where with the bike you are on, they're probably going to be banging around like the back roads a little bit. You know what I mean? Like the 80 series back roads, things like that. Steve, you have to be able to do basic repairs on the trail for sure. I always had a tool bag when I had a dirt bike, plug wrench, spark plug, a couple wrenches, hose clamps, basic stuff like that. And yeah, don't limit yourself to that either. It'd be good if you knew how to basically flip a tire, know a little bit about how a wet clutch works in a motorcycle so that when you're putting oil changes and stuff in there, you're not just dumping any old thing in there and, prematurely burning the clutch. Maybe be able to acknowledge when you have fork seal leaks and things like that. Maybe not necessarily need to repair them, but at least acknowledge when they happen so you can get some of this stuff in. YouTube and forums, like Ben said, is the best place to get information on this.
Yeah. So I just typed in the 125 Honda just to see horsepower. One of them was around 13 horsepower. From 2012 to 2016, Honda still made a CFR 250L. And it looked like that one put out about 28.8 or 22.8 horsepower, which is honestly not that much different than my 19 horsepower on the little one I just picked up. And then they went to the 300 when it was putting out 27 horsepower. So
yeah, horsepower wise, it's actually still pretty spot on then.
Yeah. So yeah, you're probably looking at a little less horsepower. Can you guarantee you're getting the same horsepower? Honda generally measures the horsepower at the rear end, where some might right at the engine. One thing that I would like to caution people, do your research on what you're going to get. Um, I looked at some used ones thinking I might get a deal. Honestly, they would have cost me just as much. And little things I noticed, like the brake pedal was made out of just bent steel, where this one seems to be more of a cast aluminum or cast steel. Uh, so it looks more round, more robust, less cinchy. There was a lot of cheap components. So when you're buying these brand names, there are better off-brand names, and I went with an American company, so I went with X Pro. There are three ways to get that same thing, and honestly, two of them are the same way, just a different uh, company names. So half the paperwork I have says X Pro, the other half says I think it's Extreme Sports or something, and then Amazon. And when you buy from them, that's how I get the two names because honestly, half the paperwork I get from one and the other. So I was told from online that X Pro and this other sports place, they're the same company. When you go on, X Pro gives free shipping, the other one charges shipping. The prices add up. When you look at them, they're virtually the same. And then Amazon had the lowest prices, but the highest shipping.
But once you balance it all out, it pretty much came out the same. Like overall end price
Well,
was.
yeah, if you buy from uh, Amazon, you might have the feeling that, Amazon's kind of got your back, which is kind of what I was hoping for. I don't know if I need it or not, but the other thing is where I was shipping it, and this caused me a lot of problems. Immediately, Amazon said, your credit card has been stolen, and they shut down my account, and
Yeah.
I had to call them and straighten it out. And then Visa contacted me and said, your credit card has been stolen. We need to shut it down. And I was in the middle of Jasper at the time, and I'm calling them, and I'm like, can you tell me the purchase that you think I might not have made? And then I explained it to them, and they're like, oh, so that was you. And I'm like, absolutely, it was me. Can you please let that go through? And that caused me a few delays. But it did go through in the end, and everything was fine. But it did result in some additional hassle. Uh, but at least I didn't have to finance it through a company and pay it off next 5 years.
No, and I mean that speaks volumes for itself there. So we are coming up close on our time there, Ben. So just to finish up the episode, let people know what you did get. You did say the XRs or the Extreme Pros or something there. What your initial
X
thoughts
Pro.
are on them, what you like about them, what you would change about them. That way, if we do come back to this, we can address the same things and see what you think at a later time.
Yeah. So anyone who wants to look it up on the American Amazon. I picked up an X Pro Templar 250M. There's a handful of variants of that, but that's what I got. And that is the 250 motorcycle, dirt bike tires, air cooled, uh, carbureted engine. Honestly, I'm pretty impressed. Nice thick spokes on decent wheels. Uh, all the controls seem pretty good. Could it be better? Obviously, yes. Could it be worse? Absolutely. Um, Chain was relatively thick and big. I've heard it's a cheap version and it's best upgrade, but none of that stuff cost a ton. And then the other bike, the 125, was a Storm, but also X Pro, and I got matching colors. I think maybe we'll throw some pictures up, not today, but next time we talk,
I can
maybe.
stick them in the video
Yeah.
comments or something there.
But yeah, both nice bikes, so you can pull them off the website, I guess. Uh, I'm fairly impressed with them. I drove the 125, and I'm a bigger man, and it had no trouble pulling me up over small hills and getting me into the driveway, just so I could park it. I didn't, go crazy or anything with it, and I managed to do a few small laps with the 250, but I just needed to get insurance and stuff straightened out. So that's my next step. And then the next time I go down, hopefully I'll be able to drive more because right now there's a fire ban and the trails are shut down as a result.
Do you mind if I throw the image up that you sent me earlier with the two bikes and your kid in it?
Sure.
Okay, because I have that one here. I'm just trying to cut it down a little bit, but it'll just be easier if I can just throw it up there. So this is the bikes that Ben is talking about there. That's the 250 in the background and the 125 coming up here. For scale there, that's Ben's daughter. So, and Ben himself would be riding the bigger one back there once again.
Yeah.
Propane tank and some other stuff there that'll give you a decent scale. But I mean, they're a nice looking bike. You know what I mean? They're not rickety or shady or cheap or any of that stuff. They look like a nice bike. They look like a Honda, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was pretty impressed with it. The fit and finish for the fairings could be a little bit better, but honestly, with a little bit of wiggling and stuff, everything went in. I was told Loctite as much as you can. So every time I took a bolt off, I tried to put a drop of Loctite onto it, just the blue medium hold. Um, yeah, it take time to go over it, and every time you use it, you're gonna have to inspect it. But you should any bike anyway, especially an off-road dirt bike. So, yeah,
All right, so overall, so far, satisfied with your purchases? No major nagging things that would cause you to sway away from your current choice?
no, I think I'm pretty happy to own something that's relatively new. If there's any problems, it's really going to be mostly my fault, rather than buying something that had unknown hours and kilometers on it, and had been beat up by an unknown number of people. Do I expect I'll have to update a few things? Probably carbs, probably chains. Brakes actually look decent, disc brakes front and back. Um,
Oh, I figured those would
yeah,
be drum on the back, but okay, disc all the way
no,
around, nice.
disc all the way around. I was impressed. Everything seems decent. Some of it's like small, like a little smaller than I'm used to. I think I kind of expected bigger, beefier things,
Hmm.
but no, it's well done. The exhaust is good. I thought it would be louder. It was decently quiet. It's a dirt bike. It's not going to be whisper quiet, but yeah,
Such is what you're getting. Once again, be aware what you're getting. You don't get surprised. So far, they look like good bikes, and from what we've been chatting about, they seem like they're working really well for you. So I am curious to see how these are going to hold up over time. I suspect they're going to hold up good. You do have a little mechanical know-how, enough to keep these things maintained relatively well. I think you're going to have a lot of fun on these and have them for a good long time. So maybe we check back in a year and we see how it goes.
yeah, yeah. I hope so.
All right.
Cool.
Well, that's kind of our time here for tonight. Hopefully, this helped a few people out what to look for and maybe even lead them down a path to a, so far, decent brand name of motorcycle.
I think a similar brand name in Canada is Venom.
Okay.
And SSR is another name in the States I've seen. And honestly, looking at the two of them, I think they're very similar bikes. So,
All right. Well, folks, if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to us at any of the things you see down there. You can find us on any of the social media. Look for us on our website, which should be there. And there's a contact us page. You can shoot us any kind of messages you want. If we don't get back to you right away, it's not because we're trying to be rude. It might have got lost in spam, but I do go back through manually and check every message that goes through the spam box. So I will get to it eventually. It just may take a little bit more time if for some reason it ended up there, and it has happened once or twice in the past. But generally, it comes straight through to us. We get them right away. We try to get back to you within a couple days. Other than that, we'll see you next week, folks. Have a good time. See you all.
yeah.